We have an impending financial collapse coming. You're going to be told it's all sorts of things to blame, like the Ukraine and the Rona. The government spending, you'll likely want to blame them as well for causing inflation and everything. But they aren't to blame. And in this video, I'm going to tell you who is to blame and why they are to blame. I'm not offering any solutions out of this problem because I don't have any. Maybe you've got some. You can tell me, but I'm just telling you why the system is doomed and whose fault it is. So we are running in a system that wasn't created by us. So it was created by, let's just call them the top. They created the system. So ultimately the system is their doing, and they know it's going to collapse for these reasons. We live in a system that needs to inflate. We live in a system of debt backed by debt, and I'll show you that in a second. And the constant inflation is created because people, you, me, everybody, we create the money. We ask for the money, and the money is given to us because we ask for it. So let's take John Lunchpail Joe Worker. He wants to buy a house for $500,000. The money doesn't exist. It's not there. It's not ready. It doesn't exist. And he goes to the bank and he says, I want $500,000 for that house. And the bank says, 500 grand. There you go. Joe, knock yourself out. And Joe buys the house and he's happy. He goes to work every day driving his truck or whatever he does. Well, there's millions of Joes all around the world doing this. And every time they do that, their 500,000 enters the economy. Now, I just want you to track that money. So when Joe spent that money on the house, on the 500,000, some of it went to lawyers, and within the law firm, it went to their paralegals and secretaries and things like that. Some of it went to the real estate agent and their underlings. And when they spent it on paperwork and signs and brochures, and cleaning is another one. Some of it went to the builder, and it became the builder's income, and he distributed it to all the contractors and the tradesmen, the tilers and the plumbers and the roof tilers, the painters and the carpet layers and the electricians, the gardeners, the concreters, the steel fixers. All of those people had the money. They got a share of that 500,000 and it became their income. Let's just take a carpenter. So at lunchtime, he buys lunch from the corner store, from the cafe, from the diner. So that money now becomes the income of the diner. Some of it goes to the boss, some of it goes to the waiter, waitresses working behind the counter, serving the tables. And they use some of that money to buy their groceries, makeup, shoes, put petrol in their cars and so on. So that $500,000 that Joe borrowed actually becomes the income of many other people. Where does Joe's income come from? Most likely it's somebody else's money that was spent into the system in the same way. Which means Joe's income is based on someone else's debt. But that debt is an advance on their future income. Joe has said, I want to take an advance on my future income. It's like taking an advance on royalties or an advance on commission for an agent, sales agent. The difference though is, if you work for a real estate agent and you get an advance on your commission, when your commission comes, you only lose the advance. You don't lose the advance in interest. So when you take an advance on your future income from a bank, the bank charges you, doesn't just charge you a flat interest. If you take $10,000 as a loan and they say the interest is 8%, they don't just say, okay, pay us back $10,800. They say it's $800 interest a year. So by the time you pay it back with your loan schedule over 5 years, you might have paid back $14,000. $12,000, whatever it is. I don't know, and it doesn't really matter. But that's the basics of it. Now, here's the thing. The extra money that you have to pay back, because it's an advance on your future income, where's that coming from? Well, that's coming from someone else's loan paid into the system. Now, if we had fixed money, then we couldn't charge interest. If you had 1,000 people living in a town and they all worked, and the town was a bread factory, and they all lived in single room or single bedroom dwellings, everyone is single in this town, and they all eat one loaf of bread a day, and there's no people come in and no people come out, but they all have to buy the bread. Now, that bread factory can sell it to them for $1, but it can't pay them more than $1 in wages, because it's only get $1 back, assuming electricity and all the produce is free, which means that's harmony. If someone has to borrow $10 and then pay back 12, where are they getting the extra $2 from? They only get paid $1 a day and they have to spend $1 a day on the food. So where does the extra money come from? Well, they borrowed the $12, which means there's $2 now extra floating around in the system. That's where it comes from. But it's within the whole system. It's going to take a long time for it to get back to them. And if they decide they'll skip a day, then it means for one day of the week, the bread place only makes $999 and not $1,000. So they have a shortfall, which is great for you because you still got paid and you didn't spend the $1. So you think, that's great, I can pay back my loan with the $1. But the bread company has a shortfall. So the bread company starts to go out backwards. And the only way they can rectify it is by raising prices, hello, inflation, here we come, to cover for the loss, or to let one of the staff members go. So you can see in a fixed system, it's not going to work. But in the system that we have, the money doesn't exist until someone demands it. I demand $500,000 so I can buy that house. And when there's 1 million people demanding $500,000 to buy that house, with interest attached, that's $1 million extra dollars that's just created like that. Now, we all notice that when the government decides they're going to do it with $4 billion, and we go, oh, look at that, the government just created $4 billion. No wonder inflation's gone to hell. Well, what about the people who have been doing this for years? But now here's the catch. It's the people that are creating the inflation because they keep taking advances on their future income. So you say, okay, mister, what if we stop? Well, I've just showed you that $500,000 that Joe borrowed for his house, that became the income of so many people, it's not funny. If he didn't do that, and if everybody just stopped borrowing money, what would happen to the society? What would happen to the economy? What would happen? Well, all those tradesmen wouldn't be able to go to the smoko shop and buy their lunch, which means that cafe would go out of business and all the people in it would have no wages. So they couldn't pay back any loans they had. And without wages, they wouldn't be able to borrow money either. And if everyone just stopped playing the game, the system collapses. And this is why you can't be told by the powers that be, by the ones that have the ear of the masses. They can't tell you this. Because if they say to you, we have an impending financial collapse coming, you'll stop taking out loans and that will make the collapse happen. If they tell you it's because of compound interest, you will demand the removal of compound interest. And of course, they won't make as much money. Now, without compound interest, even if it was just the flat interest, even if you borrowed $10,000 and they said, just pay back $10,800, well, it's still the same. You're still creating more. You're still requiring more money than you borrowed, but it's slower. It's a slower road to collapse than what we currently have. What we currently have is a system whose inevitable collapse is mathematically done. It will happen. It's unavoidable. All that you can do is kick the can down the road to inject more money into the system to stop it collapsing. That's all that's ever been done. whether it's to change the migration policy to bring more people in and therefore more money needs to be created for housing and things to house all those people, more money floats around the system, whether it's to encourage women into the workforce so they can borrow more and inject more money into the system, to go off the gold standard so that you can legitimately print more money. Why are you printing more money? Because the people are demanding the money. They want to borrow the money. They want to take advances on their future income. The mess we're currently in, the collapse that is impending, inevitable, is created by all the people demanding advances on their future income. Of course, if they didn't demand advances on their future income, the collapse happens straight away. And then we just move on with our life. And if that's how it is, we just have lots of little collapses over the last 80 years. But because that's not what's happening, and because everybody's been able to take advances on their future income without any repercussions and without knowing what the repercussions are, the top knows. Remember, they created the system. They created the system. They can't let you know that they created the system and that it's the system's fault, because then you'll demand a different system. So they have to blame something else. So we blame the Rona, we blame the Ukraine, we blame Russia, Putin, we blame China, we blame the climate change, we blame anything other than the true culprits, and that is a faulty system and everybody taking advances on their future income, which has created the mess that we're in now.